It is time now for our big board, and we're breaking down more of this morning's top stories. As we just mentioned, Dr. Ashton, Dr. Besser here at the table. We're going to have more on their story in just a moment. But first, that Jinx bombshell, a newly released interrogation tape of Robert Durst, the real estate heir made famous in the HBO documentary Jinx, now awaiting trial in Los Angeles for the 2000 murder of his close friend Susan Berman. Dan Abrams joins us now. And Dan, the tape shows an interview with Durst just after his arrest in 2015, and in it he claims he was on drugs during the filming of the Jinx. Let's take a look.
For the whole long weekend when I did the interviews for the Jinx, I was on some meth. And when I looked at the little pieces of it, I was going like this and like that. And it should have been obvious.
So he says he was on meth. Why did the LA District Attorney's Office release that tape?
Well, it came up in the context of a court filing. Basically, the prosecutors are arguing that this tape should be admitted into evidence. The defense is saying that it was improper, that it wasn't a voluntary statement. And for now, prosecutors are saying to the judge, can you review all of the evidence to determine what might be admissible and what not? But let's take a step back here and think about this. This is a guy who had just been busted because he talked too much. And then what does he do? He talks too much again. And so now there's even more fodder to potentially use against him from this statement, where throughout the questioning, he kind of makes it seem like he might have done it. He's not denying it again and again and again.
Now, Dan, when you say he talks too much, this is what you're referring to. In the final episode of The Jinx, he went to the bathroom, thought the camera stopped rolling, but they didn't, and this is what they caught.
What the hell did I do? Kill them all, of course.
And a lot of people are looking at that as an admission of guilt. So could this footage be used against him in court, or could the defense say he was on drugs?
Well,
look, know what he was saying.
Yeah, okay. Well, the I was on drugs defense, and therefore things that I said shouldn't be used against me, isn't going to work unless somehow the filmmaker was sitting there with a syringe secretly putting it into Robert Durst, and he had no idea what was happening. So the bottom line is that's not going to be the defense. And I think there's also no question that at least a lot of, if not all of, what we saw on the Jinx will come into evidence in this case. Whether that particular statement comes in or not, they'll fight over it. But the bottom line is Robert Durst talked too much, and now it's going to be used against him.
It's fascinating.
It is. We'll be waiting for more on that one.
Absolutely. All right, thank you, Dan. And up next, they say whatever a man can do, a woman can do better. All right, well, that may be the case when it comes to saving lives. There's a new study by researchers at Harvard that finds female doctors outperform their male counterparts. Dr. Besser, what do you have to say for yourself?
All right, so let me describe this a little bit. They looked at more than 1 million hospitalizations of people over 65, and they looked at the likelihood that someone would die within 30 days of going in the hospital or be readmitted within 30 days of leaving the hospital. And they found that patients did slightly better if their medical doctor was a woman, but it was slight. It was about 0.5%. But when they did their analysis, they said it's real.
32,000 people, right? Is that what they said the number was for that study?
Well, if you multiply out that small number by the number of people who go in the hospital, you come up with something like 32,000. But yeah, question is that 0.5%, is it truly real? Their analysis would say yes.
And Dr. Ashton, what do you say?
I am not the slightest bit surprised by this news. And we do it in high heels. Sorry, Michael.
Well, I don't mind. I like a good high heel.
But look, I think that the issue is they didn't really have a theory as to why. They said that could it be that women are more nurturing? Do we communicate better? And I think that needs to be studied. And of course, they bring up the issue of pay equality, which is a real issue, not just in medicine, but in a lot of specialties. But I think the complicated thing here is, where does this slippery slope end? Are you going to talk about outcome and pay equality, or are you going to say that you should pay the same people for the same work? Because then, if you talk about outcomes, are you going to pay teachers differently if they have different success rates with their students? Anchors who get better ratings, they'll get paid more. So again, I think the clinical outcome part is important. but the pay issue may be true and unrelated.
Well, I think the point about the pay issue is that women physicians, on average, if you look at academic medical centers, they make $20,000 a year less.
Wow.
They're underpaid.
Yeah.
And some said, well, it's because their outcomes aren't better. Here, this study's saying their outcomes, they clearly aren't worse, and they may be a little better.
Full disclosure, my brother is a doctor, and he's an awesome doctor, and he's a much better doctor than I ever could be. So I don't know if it's always fair to break it down in gender. There are lots of differences between and among doctors.
Well, look, and I think this is going to fire the competition, right? I mean, we are all competitive people, but in medicine, there's some really wicked competition. In my field, which is a surgical specialty, we go at it. And again, we're going to see men, women, and maybe everyone will step up.
And Dan, I was going to ask you, but you wrote a book already. I know where you stand because your book says that women are better than men at a multitude
He
of
says
things.
it everything,
yes,
basically.
basically everything.
And one of my chapters 5 years ago was on women being better doctors. And the evidence was that men get sued more as doctors. And there was a big study in England which was done where double the complaints per capita were about male doctors than about female. I think women spend more time as doctors with their patients.
All right, Dan wrote the book on it. All right, Dr. B, Dr. A, Dan, thank you.